Good evening, namaskar, and a very warm welcome to all our viewers to Dateline 5 p.m. with me, Deepika. Your daily half-an-hour window, Dateline 5 p.m. brings you a 360-degree analysis on international topics that matters to the world. Today, we'll bring you news, views and analysis on Sri Lanka's latest amendment that aims to empower Parliament over the President, clipping his powers. Well, the move comes after Sri Lanka's economy that collapsed, further leading to outrage by its people against Sri Lankan government. So in the next half an hour, we'll touch base with A, highlights and features of the 22nd Amendment to Sri Lankan Parliament, B, how the 22nd Amendment will accelerate democratic powers in the island nation, and C, we will also talk about will this 22nd Amendment pave an exit route to Sri Lanka's multiple crises? So first up, let's quickly begin with the top headlines of the hour. Sri Lanka's 22nd Amendment aims to empower Parliament over President by clipping his powers. The move comes after Sri Lanka's collapsed economy, leading to outrage by its people against Sri Lankan government. Russia and Ukraine accuse each other of shelling Europe's biggest power plant, Zaporizhzhia. UN Chief Antonio Guterres proposes a demilitarized zone at the site, while International Atomic Energy Agency Chief Rafael Grossi hints at the grave consequences of such military operations. India expresses concerns and calls for mutual restraint. Latvia and Estonia withdraw from cooperation group between China and over a dozen Central and Eastern European countries, follows footsteps of Baltic neighbor Lithuania, which withdrew last year. Move comes amid Western criticism towards China over escalating military pressure on Taiwan and Beijing's ties with Russia during the invasion of Ukraine. European nations send firefighting teams to help France tackle a monster wildfire, while forest blazes also raged in Spain and Portugal. The head of the European Space Agency urges immediate action to combat climate change. Largest annual celebration of Indian cinema outside of India, the Indian Film Festival of Melbourne begins from today. It is a screening over 100 films from a range of genres and themes. International Youth Day 2022 is being celebrated today across the world with the theme Intergenerational Solidarity, creating a world for all ages, bringing youth issues to the attention of the international community. International Youth Day celebrates the potential of youth as partners in today's global society. Sports, KL Rahul receives green signal from BCCI's medical team to head the Indian team in the forthcoming 3 ODI tour of Zimbabwe. Shikhar Dhawan made the vice captain for the series. And FIFA officially brings forward the opening match of this year's World Cup by 1 day to November the 20th in a rare schedule change, allows the host nation Qatar to play after the opening ceremony. So those were the top headlines that we are tracking for all our viewers here at Dateline 5 p.m. And to now start with the lead story of the day, the topic that matters to the world. Well, Sri Lanka's economic crisis is a result of several factors, including COVID-19, which battered its tourism-reliant economy and slashed remittances from workers overseas, rising oil prices, populist tax cuts. Sri Lanka, an island nation of 22 million people, have been suffering a severe shortage of foreign exchange, leading to widespread power cuts in recent months after being left unable to pay for fuel shipments, and in continuation to this, deepest economic crisis took place. And the Justice Minister then proposed the 22nd Amendment. Our next reporter's got more details. Take a look.
Sri Lanka's Justice Minister Vijayadasa Rajapakse had earlier said that the newly proposed 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, while being based on the 19th Amendment, will transcend the latter's democratic features while also retaining the more progressive aspects of the 20th Amendment. Unlike in the 19th Amendment, the 3 members of the Constitutional Assembly from Parliament will not be selected by the Prime Minister and the Leader of Opposition. Instead, 1 member will be appointed by and of the ruling party, 1 by and of the main opposition, and 1 member from the majority appointment from and of the other parties. The 3 civilian members of the Constitutional Council will be appointed by the Speaker with the approval of Parliament without intervention by the Prime Minister or the Leader of Opposition. Additionally, in case of emergency, the President can take over a ministry on the advice of the PM and transfer of presidential power. Meanwhile, former Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa arrived in Thailand on Thursday as he seeks temporary shelter in a second Southeast Asian country after fleeing his island nation last month amid mass protests. Rajapaksa is expected to stay temporarily in Thailand after fleeing Sri Lanka for Singapore on 14th July. He resigned from office shortly afterwards following unprecedented unrest over his government's handling of the worst economic crisis in 7 decades, and days after thousands of protesters stormed the president's official residence and office. Bureau Report, DD India.
So a strong and bold move to change the landscape there in Sri Lanka. So now it's also time to take a look at the key features of what the 22nd Amendment has really got. Well, to start with, the transfer of presidential powers, that's important really, that becomes over here. Well, it would transfer some presidential powers to the hands of a Constitution Council. Also, moving on, this would then recommend candidates for these appointments that the President could choose from. Also, the appointments the presidents make, if we talk about the appointments, then the President would be able to appoint a Chief Justice, other senior judges and an Attorney General along with a central bank governor. So this is what the 22nd Amendment proposes. And continuing on the appointments, Prime Minister would recommend appointments to the cabinet. So this is the power, the degree of power that has been given to the Prime Minister. The President would not be allowed to hold any ministry positions except the defense. So this is in line with the 19th Amendment that says that he would hold only defense ministry. Also talking about the opportunity for public to engage in legislative process. So the bill proposes in Parliament can be contested in the Supreme Court. So this is the power that has been given to the people. Also the bills can be contested within 14 days of the bill's presentation. So these bills can be subject to contest if people wish to. We are talking about the key features of the 22nd Amendment over here, and now the next thing that we're going to pick up is action against bribery and corruption, that also the 22nd Amendment talks about. So the Sri Lanka will establish laws to carry out provisions of United Nations Convention against Corruption. Also moving on, Bribery and Corruption Commission Law and Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Law will also be updated under this new 22nd Amendment. Moving on, when we talk about re-establishments, that also becomes an important point over here. So Public Procurement Commission and Audit Services Commission, which were dissolved by the 20th Amendment, will be reinstated, re-established by the 22nd Amendment. So these are some of the key features that the 22nd Amendment brings on table for the people, and especially when we talk about bringing those people back to track who've been protesting so far. And now, since the amendment has been made taking its learnings from the 19th Amendment that we also just mentioned, let's quickly take a look at key similarities as well as key differences between the 19th and the 20th Amendment through the help of these graphics. So the basic feature of the 19th Amendment are all there in the 22nd Amendment. We are talking about the key similarities, and also the re-establishing the Constitutional Assembly will be there in the 22nd Amendment. Moving on, re-establishing the Constitutional Assembly has the power to approve appointments of High Court judges and higher government officials, and as in the 19th Amendment, the Police Commission, Public Service Commission, Election Commission and Bribery Commission will be independent institutions. Also, now let's talk about the key differences. 3 members of Constitutional Assembly from Parliament would not be selected by the Prime Minister and opposition leader. 1 member will be appointed by and of the ruling party, 1 by and from the main opposition, and 1 member from the majority appointment from other parties. Well, key differences also aims to restrict the President's ministerial portfolios to just the Defence Ministry. So these are the key differences between the two, whereas the 19th Amendment granted them authority over the Environment and Mahaveli ministries too. However, for now, they will be restricted to just the Defence Ministry. And to take this discussion ahead, I am now joined by Dr. Srimal Fernando, Advisor, New Regional Diplomacy, straight from Colombo. Thank you, Mr. Fernando, Dr. Fernando, for joining us exclusively on D-Day India to take this discussion forward. Well, the new amendment aims to clip presidential powers. However, if you look at the degree, it is still less, as people were expecting more. What is your assessment says of that?
Thank you very much for inviting me. And well, this new amendment is a mixture of 19th as well as 20th Amendment, and it gives more democratic features and devolution of power from centre to the regions. Sri Lanka has 9 provinces and more than 270 divisions. So there are more democratic rights, with the 3 public services commission becoming more independent. Also with this transformation from 20th Amendment, which was more of politicalizing the public service, has now gradually, with this amendment, will be more independent. And this is a key where the power is devolved from the center, that is from Colombo or the city center, towards the regions, and more democratic rights will be coming in. So this is kind of a system, gradually changing a system, and the power of the parliament is coming from executive powers down the line. So the people's power also is getting stronger, with checks and balances on corruption or human rights, and the law is getting more stronger. This is how I see it.
Yeah. And if we talk about the draft that have been made, many experts have been saying, on the other hand, that there could have been changes that could have been made in the previous amendments rather than making another 22nd Amendment. What feasibility do you see?
Well, yes. I mean, the point was there should have been all-party consensus if more amendments and more annexures could have been amended, and people's rights, which was coming from the youth uprising, more rights could have come into the picture. However, with the existing, because this process started not from this government, it started in the previous government, that was under Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and it has been going on, and even before. So it was a gradual transformation from 20th, but with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe coming as an executive president, with this all-party consensus coming in, the speedy expedition of this new constitutional amendment brought a kind of a stepping stone or a platform to begin, but further amendments can be done in the near future if there are elections held. So election commission being independent is a key. Public Service Commission becoming independent means giving about 2 million public servants the independent rights, as well as the service doesn't become politicalized. It was from the 20th Amendment, this was the key drawback. It was becoming politicalized, and it was on one side. Now it's gradually, with this process, it will give more leverage to independent way where the real people, the real people with credentials will come into the picture to deliver the citizens' rights and all.
But also when we talk about the 22nd Amendment Bill, it does not completely do away with the President's power to dissolve the Parliament after 2.5 years. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, absolutely correct. The 22nd Amendment still holds defense powers, the state powers as well. However, but in a positive light, I would say this is a transformation, but still there are drawbacks. This has to be discussed in an all-party meeting, which the Prime Minister has invited. This is what the opposition is asking. This is what the youth are asking. A system change, but still it doesn't happen. But this is a little bit of a way forward in what people are aspiring. But there should be an election as soon as possible to see the people's mandate, whether this constitution is valid, because people want more power to the prime ministerialship and the government and the parliament rather than the executive body. So these are debatable questions as well as answers that has to be discussed in a future parliament.
Also, Dr. Fernando, since you said that there will be many independent committees, councils that will be there after the 22nd Amendment. So, according to you, will it be right to say that this will lead to a democratic setup in the island nation? As the minister also said that this is in line with the demand of the protesters.
To that question, I would say I will take a middle path. This is just the first step, but that doesn't fulfill because the opposition as well as the youth uprising has been asking for a democratic change as well as the new government with the election. These things haven't happened, but the new government has brought in a constitutional reform. Already, according to the constitution, this government, the president has another 2.5 years mandate. So, according to the law, it is fine, but this is not the aspiration and the mandate of the people. To test that, there should be an election and the will of the people have to be tested soon as possible within the next 8 months.
But since you've been talking about elections, do you think this will restore people's confidence back in the government?
It will not stop. From the new amendment, it gives more rights to the people, even human rights, as well as checking on corruption and giving judiciary more powers means it's the right of the people. It gives them a strength, a power for the people. So it is at least in the right direction, but still the government has to prove its credentials and how it will deliver what the people are asking this system change. It can only come through an election and an all-party consensus government, which has happened, but the election is the key to this transformation. By March, there should be council elections. In that, people's mandate will be tested at a very ground level when it comes to the regions. What party, what political candidates will have more power, and then it should move on to the general and the executive presidential election, which will come in another 2.5 years. So this should be the process, but today's amendment is far way better than 20th Amendment because it has a 19th Amendment feature, which gives,
Right. So, Dr. Fernando, election remains the key to assess people's mandate, but according to you, how much time will it actually take for a successful rollout?
I mean, the next council election is supposed to happen before March 2023. So that is municipal council, urban council, and provincial councils. So that is the feature that came out of the 13th Amendment of the country about 30 years back. So it devolved the power from the center to the regions, which is the 9 provinces, which includes Northern Province, Southern Province, and the rest of the provinces, center and the Western Province. And most of the seats are in the Western Province, which has about 3 key districts. So, and also this will project the future general election as well as what parties will win in the coming executive presidential election or the general election. This will show the people whether there is a positive reflection coming out of this constitution as well as in council election, whether it has worked. So this is kind of a litmus test. How politically viable people's mandate is tested through a constitutional reform or a platform, I would say, in this regard.
But considering the past, what if the government doesn't pass the litmus test? What could be the plan B for the government in that scenario?
I mean, the government will run out of options, because anyway the constitution says the council election is supposed to to take place in March. So, and the mandate of the provincial councils have exceeded. So there is no way that they can delay further beyond March, and it has to happen. So in that, that is the way forward, and it's abide by the country's laws. So, and the next step for a general election, of course, there is 2 years. If the parliament can, or the government is willing to have a general election with a forthcoming provincial election, it would be a good way forward in this regard.
Absolutely. Dr. Fernando, in the proposed bill Constitution Council, the government has control over the appointment of a majority of council members. But in such a case, how can such a council be considered as independent?
The main thing, the independent, now I once also referred, there are 4 commissions, and which is there in the new 22nd amendment. So that's where the key feature is still there, but when it comes to your point, you are correct. Still, it is not independent. These points have to be further, power has to be divided into people's rights or committees, but still only the 4 commissions are actually independent in this. So these are the lacunas or the gaps that have to be filled out in the coming years with further committee discussions.
Absolutely, Dr. Fernando, and also this brings us to a very important question and very important part of this 22nd constitutional amendment that abolishes the ability of dual citizen to be appointed as a member of parliament. Now, what does this signify, as a previous president, the former president Gotabaya Rajapaksa himself had dual citizenship?
In Sri Lanka, a president cannot be, has to be a Sri Lankan citizen. It was one of those parliamentarians who was a finance minister, Basil Rajapaksa and several, they were holding dual citizenship. So the 20th amendment gave that space for dual citizens to become parliament members. In this, it will not occur, but previously it did, but President Gotabaya Rajapaksa gave up his citizenship in United States, and he became a citizen of Sri Lanka to contest the presidential election in 2019. So he is still a citizen of Sri Lanka at this point. But the other parliamentary members who are holding dual citizenship, this so in this regard, that will kind of be a challenging situation for them.
Now that we are learning that a lot of support has been coming in, Sri Lanka also received some amount of fuel from other foreign countries, and in a latest development, a tweet has come in whereas Deputy Regional Director of UNDP met with the Minister Ali Sabri, and they discussed ways ahead to enhance the economy. What do you think? How do you see the way forward for Sri Lanka? How soon can they come back on to the normal track?
Yes, he has discussed with multilateral organizations. The government is discussing with International Monetary Fund. The IMF bailout as soon as possible will be the key to restart the business cycle. However, India as a neighbor is the key in this regard, with its neighborhood first policy extension of $2 billion credit line on oil and essential goods, and further extension that is being discussed with the Sri Lankan government and the Indian government is the key, with another $3.8 billion to further strengthen Sri Lanka's economy will be the key. India being the nearest and the closest regional power, is the key to bring about a solution and stability in this small island nation, which goes along with neighborhood first policy and Sagara doctrine.
Absolutely, Dr. Fernando. Thank you so much for joining us. And India has been indeed doing it through its line of credit. Well, thank you so much for joining us exclusively on DT India and taking this discussion ahead on Sri Lanka and its 22nd amendment that aims to empower the parliament. Well, that's all that we have for now in Dateline 5 p.m. But news continues here on DD India. So keep watching and keep tracking. Namaskar.
Vijayadasa Rajapaksa